Okay, Parshas Naso. Vayidaber Hashem Moshe Lemor. Naso os rosh b'nei Gershom gamheim. Beis avosam shposam. You should count, identify the heads of the b'nei Gershom according to their paternal line. Miben shloshim shana v'malo aben chamishim shana tifkarosam. They should be counted, meaning regarding the actual service to officiate from the age of 30 to the age of 50. And they are the one who are conscripted to do the service in the Ol Moed. Leviim, they're only qualified from the age of 30 to 50. So over here Rashi explains, Moshe Tzivisa b'nei Kehos liros kama yesh higiu l'chlav odo. Just as in regard to the members of the Kehos family, which is Moshe's family, they, at the age of 30, they're qualified to carry the various parts of the Mishkan, the Oron, the Mizbeach, the Shulchan. Identically, the Bnei Gershon, from the age of 30 to 50, they're qualified to participate in carrying, which we'll see, the dismantling, putting onto wagons. So over here, there's an Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh, which is very interesting. The parsha begins, Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Lemor. So the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh asks, Huchach lom vayidaber pam shniya. Lo hispik b'ma she'omav Vayidaber Hashem b'mispar b'nei Kehos mikodem she'parshas Bamidbar. At the beginning of Bamidbar says Hashem spoke to Moshe regarding the Bnei Kehos. Then it should say, after it says Naso as Rosh Bnei Kehos, it should say Naso as Rosh Bnei Gershom. Why does it have to repeat again that Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, acknowledge the family of the Bnei Gershom? If you already began saying, spoke to Moshe, acknowledge the family of Kehos, acknowledge the family of Gershom. Because in terms of what are we speaking about? The levels of responsibility, except the number. She's explaining that it's another direct level of directive to identify those who are qualified the second time to the ones who qualified the first time. Moshe's family, Kehos, which was Moshe's family, why were they given the responsibility to carry the Oron, the Shulchan? Because they were more spiritualized, they were more advanced, spiritually speaking, than the other families of Levi. Therefore, there was a separate directive for them. Naso means you're elevated. The word Naso means you're elevated to enter into this level of responsibility, into that level of conscription. Now there's another level of conscription. It's another directive. Therefore, Vayidaber is mentioned again. When we speak about Bnei Gershom and Merari, those are the other two families of Levi, it doesn't say Vayidaber a second time here. Because Gershom and Merari, regarding their levels of responsibility, was a similar responsibility. They weren't more advanced one than the other. Therefore, it's one directive, and each one is addressed to that particular level of responsibility. However, when he spoke about Naso Bnei Kehos, the Bnei Kehos being more elevated, therefore their directive is a different directive. They're spoken to separately. L'zekovelo dibur b'fnei atzmo v'lo shetziva al mispa b'nei Merari v'omar b'nei Merari tifkot lo kova dibur lahem b'fnei atzmo shem l'maylo elaminyon. The only difference is the number. Mimasha v'tifkot lo tiso. Okay. Zos avodas mishpos hagershuni lavod ulamaso. This is the avoda of the family of Gershuni, lavod, to work and to carry. What is that? The nosos yirios Mishkan. They carry the curtains. That's Ol Moed. Michseu atachash asher olam milmolo. Rashi explains there were three coverings. There was the inner covering, the in-between covering, then there was the upper covering. That's Mosaf Posach Ol Moed. So here again, it's very important. It says over here, they were conscripted in Posach Chav Gimel, Kalabolitz Votsova Lavod Avoda Bol Moed. The term used is over here, they were conscripted to do the avoda. What is the connotation of avoda? The work. But they Kosoma Latsova Levad. Keheim Hoyunosim Kol Klei Kodesh HaPnimim. Zelma Latsova. Masha'enke Mashufanenu Hem Tzovim Tzova HaTzovea Kodesh. Shein Tzva HaKodesh. Zelma Litzu Tzovim Yatem Tzov Matzova. I'm just going to go a little further over here. I'm going to skip a little bit. Then it says, "B'nei Mora the Mishposam Chavtes Levesavos Tifkarosim Ben Shloshim Shana B'Mala Aden Chamishim Shana Tifkadem Kolat Sova Havolat Sova Lavod Es Avodas Ol Moed." So over here, the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh says something interesting. He says both by Gershon and Merori, you find the word avoda mentioned. Avoda, lavra avoda. There's a kos of shinu latzia, mashkos b'nei kos latzova. Yeah. Second. It says over there, Vayidaber Hashem Moshe V'Aaron Lamar. Naso was Rosh B'nei Kos. They're the first ones to be acknowledged. Mitok B'nei Halevi, B'nei Levi, V'Shkos B'Ei then Shloshim Shana B'Mala, then Chamishim Shana, Bo Latzova, Lasos Melocha B'Ol Moed. Okay? Pasuk Gimel, it says, what are they being conscripted from the age of 30 to 50? Lasos Melocha B'Ol Moed. So what term is used? To do malacha. It doesn't say lasos avoda, avodas avoda. So here the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh makes the point. Shina me omor beavodas b'nei Gershon nekori lavod avoda. In this week's Parshas Naso, when it speaks about the responsibility b'nei Gershon Merori, it says lavod avoda, to do the work. But over here by b'nei Kos, it says lasos malacha. It's a different term. Malacha doesn't have the connotation of difficulty, of something which is burdensome. Regarding the B'nai Gershom Merori, it says lavod avoda, or lavod. Here it says lasos malacha. Here b'zeshem close masim nekos avoda. What do you mean? What's the avoda? They carried the oron, they carried the shulchan, they carried the mizbeach. He says the answer is because the Gemara tells us that the Oron, when they carried, there was no physical weight to it. Because it was the Shechina, it's as if it carried itself. So to connote that it wasn't burdensome, that's why it says Melocha rather than Avoda, which is not the case by Gershon and Merori. Gershon and Merori, where they carried the Mishkan, the curtains, the covers, the beams, and all that, which is not at that same level. Therefore, it says avodah. It connotes something which is much more difficult. That's the first thing he says. Now, the Bnei Kos, when they carried, they didn't, what they carried was not put on wagons. They carried it on their shoulders. Why did they carry on their shoulders? Because what they carried in terms of the dimension of Kedusha was not a level of Kedusha. It wasn't appropriate to put it on the wagons. Because the reason why they carried it was to acknowledge the kavod of the Oron, which had to do with the Shekhinah. It's like carrying the master on the shoulder. When you carry the king, as heavy as it may be, acknowledging the privilege to carry the king, there's no such thing as the word burdensome. The connotation of burdensome has no relevance to that. So therefore, the Bnei Kos that they carried the Oron, they were given the responsibility of malacha, not avoda. Avoda has a connotation of something which is difficult, which is heavy. It's burdensome. The word burdensome, to use it to be associated with the Oron, would be considered disrespectful, because when you carry the king, nothing's too difficult. When you carry the Oron, that's the Shekhinah. Therefore, he says that's why by Kos it says Malocha, Lasos Malocha, it does say Lasos Avoda. Lavor Avoda for that reason. You understand what he's saying? Avoda has a connotation of with difficulty. Malocha doesn't have that same connotation. For instance, we speak with the Lama Tes Malochas on Shabbos. The 39 creative activities not permitted on Shabbos. It has nothing to do with because it's difficult. It's because of its level of creativity, which each one represents. That's the reason why it's not permitted. Right? Because Hashem created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh day. All the creative activity in the Mishkan is the equivalent of what Hashem did during the 6 days and seventh day of creation. It's creativity. The word malacha doesn't necessarily mean burdensome, heaviness. For Hashem, there's nothing too difficult. So malacha means it has special value. And the word malacha literally means work, but it doesn't have that connotation. Avoda means something which is an avoda, which is heaviness. Therefore, when it comes to carrying the Oron, it's malacha. Carrying the rest of the parts of the Mishkan, that's lavod avoda. That's to do the avoda. Okay, that's the concept. So, I
thought the Rav said it the opposite initially. The avoda was so it's malacha that has a special connotation as
not burdensome, not
burdensome, and avoda has
avoda. Something is work. You're working. Okay, so I had difficulty. The pasuk says, "Ivdos Hashem b'simcha, b'gilu b'roda." You should serve Hashem with joy, and you should have glee with trepidation. So we say the word is Ivdu as Hashem, Ivdu, avoda, right? It's avoda. So the answer is because the moment we associate the word simcha, automatically that puts it in context that the avoda was speaking over here. If you do it with simcha, it's not avoda. If it's a Ivdu as Hashem, you'd say Ivdu as Hashem, despite its difficulty, despite how difficult it is. But if you say Ivdu as Hashem b'simcha, if you do it with joy, that means you see it as a privilege. Once you see it as a privilege, as difficult it is, it's not difficult. Because it's a privilege. That's Ivdu as Hashem b'simcha. It says by the Tochacha in Parshas Naso, why will the Tochacha come upon the Jews? Asher lo avarta es Hashem Elokecha b'simcha tuv levav. You did not serve Hashem with joy and with goodness of heart. So why are they deserving, God forbid, of the Tochacha? Because when you serve Hashem and you serve it begrudgingly, with great difficulty, it's a problem. Because if you recognize what it means to serve Hashem, you should do it with joy and with hardness. And if not, that means you don't understand it. You see it that you're doing God a favor, But it's not that you feel privileged that you're able to serve him because he took you as his people. That's the reason why the consequence of not having simcha regarding their, what is it? Chas v'sholom tzetochacha. We find later in Parshas, in Chumash Bamidbar, that there's a mitzvah of lavod avoda. What's lavod avoda? So Rabbeinu Bachi says, the mitzvah avoda is, there's an avoda to the avoda, to do it b'simcha. To do avoda with simcha isn't avoda. It's not simple. You have to be at a special level to do that. Because if you don't do it and you see it as something which is difficult, then it has a negative connotation. You experience and process it negatively. And if you're serving Hashem, you're supposed to serve Hashem with simcha. We find, it says in Pirkei Avos, in Lomar the Torah harbe al tachzi tov latzmecha. If you study the enormous amount of Torah, don't pride yourself. You shouldn't pride. What's priding? Pride means it tells you something about you. So what are you supposed to feel? If you studied and you have a tremendous knowledge base of Torah, you're supposed to feel privileged. You're privileged that Hashem gave you the ability to succeed in this area. And therefore you possess such a level of knowledge. It's not you priding yourself. I am special because I'm privileged. Therefore, I have the joy. That's atasuk tov latzmecha. Don't pat yourself on the back. Yaakov worked 7 years for the hand of Rochem. And the Torah tells us it's kiyom machodim. It was like a few days. You couldn't have had a more difficult master or boss employee than Lavan. He worked him to the bone. What he wasn't liable for, he held him accountable for. And it says, despite that, Yaakov considered the 7 years kiyom machodim. How do we understand it? So if you remember, what did we say? Lavan didn't appreciate the value of Rachel, his daughter. Who was Rachel? Rachel is the primary matriarch. Yaakov understood when he saw Rachel, when originally he kissed her and then he cried, because he understood she being the primary matriarch, he understood the connection between them. And the reason why he cried, Rashi over there cites the Chazal, because he already had foreseen that she would not be buried with him in the Mars Machpelah, as Leah was buried with him. That's why he cried. So if you understand the whole objective of creation is there should be a Klal Yisrael, and the only way you could have a Klal Yisrael, you have to have matriarchs, and the primary matriarch is Rachel Imenu. So what are 7 hard years? 7 hard years is a pittance for the hand of Rachel. Therefore, as difficult as it was, understanding its value, it's Kiyom HaChodim. It's like a few days. So certain things, as difficult as they may be, understanding their innate value, that all existence is not, can't hold a candle up to what this is. This is what? It's not avoda. It's melocha. That's what it is. Therefore, as difficult it is, it's ivdos Hashem b'simcha. You serve God with joy, but it's avoda. How do you do it with joy? Because if you understand who you're serving and who you're subordinating yourself to, you cannot not have joy, because it's the ultimate privilege. I always say, one time, to be chosen to be part of the president's cabinet, a person would take a reduction in salary for that position. Why? Because the privilege or the honor of functioning in that capacity, you're willing to forego being the chairman of the board of General Motors to take that position. Because you understand its value. Because it's not the money, it's what you're doing and where you're at. That's what it is. That when the Bnei Yisrael counted, they counted with Machzah Shekel. Each one had to give half a silver coin. And why did they have to give a silver coin? Because it says, because when you count people individually, they're subject to what? To the attribute of justice. So to counter that, the Machzor shekel was used to purchase the communal offerings. Right? That's explicit in the pasuk. When the Leviim were counted, there were over 22,000 Leviim, where there was no Machzor shekel, even though they were individualized. The Jews, when they were counted, they had to give the Machzor shekel to ward off Magefel, to ward off that there should not be a plague. So why, when the Leviim were counted, they should have also given the Machzor shekel, that the Machzor shekel should be given for atonement to ward off, to counter the Midas Adin, because nobody's perfect. That's the question. What would you say? I was thinking of two things. We find that when Hashem said to Moshe to count the Leviim, he said to Hashem, he says, how am I supposed to count them? If you're counting them from the age of 30 days and above, many of the children, they're being nursed by the mothers. How could it go into the tent? It's not really appropriate. So what does Hashem say to Moshe? You just pass by the tent and stand at the entrance of the tent, and I will tell you how many children are in that family. So it comes out the sum total of the Leviim was not a human counting. And of course, the ones who were adults or more than infants, they were counted. But the sum total, Hashem participated in that counting. So I was thinking that when it's Hashem is involved in the counting, the whole idea is because when you individualize a person and the human eye comes on anybody, automatically the person's being individualized. When Hashem, which is the source of all Rachmim, when his eye, Kaviyachol, comes upon anyone, this is the ultimate bracha. As a result of that, Leviim needed no Machzor shekel. That's what I was thinking. That's the first thing I was thinking about. What do you say?
I thought all the countings, Rabbi, were really dictated by Hashem, except the one we talked about when David HaMelech did the counting. That was
no. And there was a plague, and there was a plague.
But all the other countings were initiated by
Hashem. But when they were counted with a Machzor shekel.
Okay, yeah.
And the question is, so why by the Leviim, when they were counted, why wasn't it Machzor shekel?
I mean, I think it's still a good question. I'm not sure.
No, so I'm asking because Hashem is the one who did the counting here. He did.
I hear
and that's the first thing that came to mind. The second thing that came to mind was this, that the Leviim, over here, what exactly is the function of the Leviim? Why are they being counted? They're being counted because they're taking the place of the Bechorim. Because taking place of the Bechorim who originally were meant to be the Kohanim. Right? They were meant to be the Kohanim, to be the officiants. But because Klal Yisrael participated in Chet Egel, therefore, as a result of that, they were no longer qualified, they were tainted. Therefore, the Leviim took their place. And therefore, how many Bechorim did you have? There were more than 22,000 Bechorim. You had 22,000. For the extra, you needed a Machzor shekel to redeem them. But the vast majority were covered by the Leviim. So the Leviim, that counting, in what context were they counted? Because they did not participate in the Chet Egel. So because they did not, that counting had to do with not participating in the Chet Egel, you don't need anything to count at Midas Adin. Because here we're putting them on a pedestal. The counting is, who are they? They are the only ones who did not participate in the Chet Egel. And therefore, as Rashi says, they're called Legion Shemel, the God's Legion. They're the Legion of the King. Therefore, there's no need for a Machzor shekel for that reason. Which I think is the correct answer. Because the counting here is to identify them of who they are, that they did not participate in the Chet Egel. So how could this counting in any way engender or activate Midas Adin? Normally counting is we have to know how many you are. So therefore, individualizing a person automatically creates focus on the individual, and it could create an audit. Audit is Midas Adin. Here, the counting of the Leviim has nothing to do with just to know how many they are, because to know how many they are. Because we have to know how many people are actually replacing the Bechorim who are no longer qualified. And they are qualified. And why are they qualified? Because they did not participate in the Chet Egel. As a result of that, this counting is the ultimate level of sus. Therefore, they're protected from what? From the Midas Adin for that reason. Hashem sanctified the Bechorim because during Max Bechoros, if they weren't taken to God's personal, so-called his personal cabinet, they would have been subject to the Midas Adin. But because they were Shlal Shamayim, they were in God's corner, so to say, they were not subject to the 10th plague. Otherwise, they would have, because the eldest in the family is always the most responsible. But because they went into God's domain, therefore they were protected. The Leviim here are being counted in the context that they are in God's domain. Therefore, they're not subject to Midas Adin in this particular context at this moment. Okay, we're going to see the.
Just real quick, according to.
Yeah, go ahead.
I also have a question, Rabbi.
Repeat. Go ahead. Alan, answer the question.
The question with Makos Bechoros, it says that the Egyptian males and all firstborn males were punished, and the Jewish males were spared. So the question I asked is, what did the firstborn Egyptian males do that was so wrong? And two, it also assumes that we did something wrong and we were spared. So in other words, what did we do that was wrong?
Correct. So the Sefarno addresses it, explains this, and he says the eldest in the family, being the eldest, represents leadership, setting the tone, being a role model. That person has the greatest level of liability. But he should have been the role model for the rest of the family. So because he failed, all the failings that follow, to a degree, identify with him. That's why he has greater culpability. I'm just quoting the Sefarno. The Jews themselves in Egypt, we were idolaters. We failed. So the only way that they could be spared, they have to enter in Hashem's domain. So God sanctified them. So despite their failing, the Midas Adin wasn't able to touch them. And therefore they were not subject to the Midas Adin, the attribute of justice of the Makas Bechoros. I mean, just explain this words of the Sefarno.
You're saying so generation after generation for those 210 years, that every 25 years or whatever the number is, that they had a chance to either learn or to be better Jews, whatever. And also the Egyptians, they also kept taking orders. They never changed. So in other words, had they improved or changed, so they weren't worthy because they didn't change.
Now, even the Egyptians themselves had liability, even the ones who weren't the Torah, but the Torah, more than anyone, because they are the eldest, they should have been so-called.
They're the leader of that generation for that family.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Good. Okay. Thank you.